Hello and welcome back to Clem's Content Corner, the number one place for line of duty content on YouTube. Episode 3 just dropped on Sunday, and I will say from the get-go that it was a resounding return to form with some of the most nail-biting scenes the show has produced in a long time. So today we are going to be digging into the development in Season 6 so far, my predictions for what's coming next, and what I thought of the episode in general. Episode 3 opens with DS Chris Lomax reporting that he has found a witness to the argument between Alistair Oldroyd and the suspect who claimed to have murdered Gail Vella, and this news appears to unsettle DCI Davidson. With the very shady display at the end of Episode 2 implying some link between Davidson and organised crime, we naturally expect the witness to reaffirm that it was indeed Carl Banks who was the aggressor. But in the first twist of the episode, the witness tentatively says that the man who clashed with Oldroyd looked different, bizarrely taking the investigation back towards Terry Boyle. When Boyle is brought in for another interview, he is escorted by Ryan, who tells Terry to keep his mouth shut. Ryan also calls Terry his best mate, and reciprocates a supportive smile, which makes what's coming later in the episode hit all the more forcefully. With Terry getting quite a lot of screen time in this season, I think it's only fair to say that Tommy Jessup, who portrays Terry, is doing an excellent job. That tense discomfort in the interview scenes is extremely genuine and makes us sympathise with how Boyle has been exploited by the OCG all the more. Terry manages to deny the accusations for the first time in this interview, saying that it had in fact been another man. But just as he starts to open up, the stress of the interview becomes overwhelming and Davidson opts to draw it to a halt. This escalates the tension because we know that Terry has more information that could be extremely valuable in solving the murder of Gail Vella, and Kate wants to keep going to try and get to that information. But even though Davidson's motives could be sketchy, she is correct when she says if the interview is seen to put too much pressure on a vulnerable person like Boyle, it could become inadmissible as evidence in the first place. What follows is one of the most exciting and dramatic moments in all of Line of Duty, with Kate just sensing something is wrong and following the car transporting Terry Boyle back to his approved premises. Ryan has misled Lisa Patel into taking a different route, which we have learned can only be a bad thing. Lindsay Denton of course took the back roads the night of the ambush in Season 2, and Jamie Desford was all but ready to do the same had he escaped the building with Jimmy Lakewell in Season 4. So the audience is immediately on red alert when the only person who could talk about what really happened the night someone confessed to the murder of Gail Vella is shown taking a different route from what had been planned. Kate continues her cautious pursuit, held up by traffic as she waits to make the same turn off the main road, whilst Terry falls asleep in transit and Ryan asks Lisa to open the window on his side. Ryan then overpowers an unsuspecting Lisa, forcing the car off the road and into the water. As the car sinks, Ryan emerges, leaving the others to drown, but to Ryan's surprise, both Lisa and Terry manage to escape from the vehicle. Ryan forces Lisa back under, drowning her to death, and would have done the same to Terry if Kate hadn't arrived in the nick of time, causing Ryan to have to resume his cover as a law-abiding officer. As backup arrives, Kate notices that Ryan's window was open whilst all of the others were closed, spurring on her suspicions about Ryan and prompting her to get in contact with AC-12. Davidson appears to know that Kate is apprehensive, commenting that it was fortunate she was just passing when the car went into the water and eyeing her up from across the riverbank when she phoned Steve. Kate then returns to AC-12 to inform Ted of her suspicions, and whilst their relationship has evidently become cold with Kate's transfer, they are able to put it behind them for the sake of getting to the truth. Many had suggested that Kate was either bent or in a deep undercover mission that transcended AC-12, but as I said in my last review, I think she just wanted a fresh start for the sake of her career. Working life at AC-12 had seen her personal life fall apart, and that has understandably been affecting her. But old habits die hard, and despite trying to move on from anti-corruption, when a case is sitting right in front of her, what else can Kate do but team up with Ted and Steve again in the search for justice? In this scene, Kate finally learns where she has seen Ryan before, with Steve remembering their terrifying encounter from Season 1, in which Ryan attempted to cut off Steve's fingers whilst he was held captive by the OCG. The team pieced together that Ryan, a recent recruit to Davidson's team and one with old ties to organised crime, was the one escorting Terry the night he almost drowned, with Davidson shutting down Terry's chance to say what really happened just before. We later see more material with Gail Vella questioning senior police officers, with Chief Constable Osborne getting grilled for his misrepresentation of the figures. Interestingly, Gail would seem to be lamenting a lack of police numbers, which makes for a good contrast against the backdrop of slogans like "Defund the police" we've heard prominently over the last year, and it's important to keep in mind that issues in the USA aren't always identical in Britain. It wasn't that long ago that there were substantial cuts to police by Theresa May, and how quickly we forget that it was not seen as a progressive move, but just another avenue for austerity. Even in Line of Duty itself, Mike Dryden decried cuts to the police in Season 2, citing the ambush as an example of the consequences of having police underprepared, under-equipped, and understaffed. Gail Vella is also seen questioning the police commissioner in regards to the lack of an investigation into police corruption that facilitated the abuse at Sandsview. And again, not shying away from the network's own wrongdoing, Line of Duty refers to the BBC's handling of false allegations made against an elderly pop star, presumably a reference to Cliff Richard. With Line of Duty sometimes accused of going about woke, I think the character of Gail Vella is actually providing a solid counter-argument, evidently having her own reporting angle and not simply a personification of the opinions of a political movement. Back to AC-12, Ted is on thin ice, with DCC Wise and Commissioner Sindwani unhappy with Ted's reckless approach to investigating Operation Lighthouse. When Ted raises the issue of the last remaining member of H, Wise advises Ted to give up on old battles, setting up one of the best Ted lines of the series to date, describing himself as the epitome of an old battle. Steve continues a battle of his own, trying to cut down on his use of painkillers, knowing that AC-9 are performing drugs tests. And Martin Compston's acting here is particularly good, even by his own standards. He captures the restlessness of the character, unable to sleep, hyperventilating, substituting pills for alcohol, all before eventually succumbing and giving in to his addiction again. Steve returns to visit Steph once more, initially angry that she mentions Steve's back pain and dependence on painkillers to Ted. But after learning that this cuts a bit deeper for Stephanie because John's undercover work had seen him forced to dabble in drug use in the past, Steve eventually concedes that this is for the best and that he has to get himself together. He also later confides in Stephanie that his injury is inhibiting him in bed, staying over but not intimately. But I stand by my theory that he has started to develop feelings for Kate, and that is what is preventing him from being intimate with anyone else. It is a bit of an insight into Steve's character that he is putting a brave face on things and using pills as a stopgap when what he really needs is more treatment to fix the root cause. Steve is impatient. He doesn't like to wait, he doesn't like anyone to think of him as being abnormal, and as he said himself, his job is the only thing he's got left. Back to Kate's suspicions, she questions Ryan about the transport of Terry Boyle, with Ryan giving what would have been plausible answers if Kate hadn't already learned of his criminal past. Credit here to Gregory Piper, reprising a role he first played as a child and picking up where he left off really impressively, with Ryan getting more and more involvement in the story with each passing episode. When Terry Boyle's missing fridge is found in a scrapyard, another lead missed by Joe Davidson's team, AC-12 ponder getting information from Farida Jatri, who had been in a relationship with Davidson. In the prison where Farida is being held, she has her wrist broken by a guard, probably to intimidate her into staying quiet, much like how Lindsay Denton was mistreated to discourage her from speaking to AC-12. When Steve mentions her injury to DCI Davidson, Davidson does appear to be concerned, despite denying any relationship when dining with Kate later on. Davidson may still have feelings for Jatri, or perhaps feels guilty if she indeed framed her with the burner phones. Either way, it is the only moment in this exchange where Joanne is on the back foot, otherwise having answers to anything Steve throws at her. To me, this is foreshadowing some emotional hold that the OCG have over her, with a sympathetic side seeming like her one weak point. On the subject, Kelly MacDonald's acting is still just a little strange to me. The scenes where Joanne is talking down to others, like when interviewing Terry or belittling Steve, make good use of the tone she is going for, but MacDonald is using that same sort of delivery in pretty much every scene, and a lot of the time it doesn't really align with how I would expect her character to communicate. Steve continues digging into Steph's finances, having earlier asked Chloe to run financial forensics checks. The morning after staying over, he snoops around the house, finding a brown envelope containing money given to her by Ted. I'm not sure if Steve suspects Ted of giving her this money, or if he is just generally suspicious over a pile of money being kept in cash in the attic, but either way, with Ted on his final warning, and riling executive officers again with his investigation into Operation Lighthouse, could Steve be unwittingly about to finish his boss's career? The episode then starts to close, with Buckles being taken to AC-12, with the implication that he is being framed by Davidson. Davidson tells Kate that it was Buckles who brought Ryan onto the team as a family friend, possibly with a Masonic connection, shortly after Buckles put forward Ryan for a commendation. Kate brings Davidson a report showing that Buckles knew the witness who pushed the investigation back towards Terry Boyle and had let her off with an ABH charge in the past, with Davidson then pinning the blame for the surveillance mistake on Buckles alone. Buckles is brought to AC-12, the missing files from the Vela investigation are found in his car, and it really looks like he's been set up. That would have my theory that Buckles is H circling the drain, although we're only on episode 3 and there were so many twists in that episode alone that I wouldn't quite call it dead in the water just yet. We do, however, see Joanne communicating with an unknown user via web chat in the closing scene, reminiscent of how Lisa talked to H in season 5. Whether this is H is unclear, and we don't know what they said to Davidson, but it looks for now that she is involved in OCG activity and trying to pin it on her superintendent. Just a couple of final things. With Ryan being something of a successor to Dot as the caddy, I expected there would be some redemption arc for Ryan, rather than repeating Dot's story. But Jed's thrown us a real curveball by making Ryan seem genuinely evil. Where Dot was a bit uncomfortable about his undeserved commendation, Ryan doesn't seem fazed, and killing doesn't have anything like the same impact it had on Dot, who always tried to pass those jobs on to others. Chief Constable Osborne was mentioned several times, and I expect he will make an in-person appearance at some point. Whilst it's been a long time since he's been in the show, if it isn't Buckles, he would probably become the frontrunner for H, with no sign of Nigel Morton as of yet. But that's a wrap. I will be back next week with another video, but if you can't wait until then, you can always join our newly launched Clem'sContent Discord server. Don't forget to like and subscribe, ring that notification bell if you want to be part of my best team, and most importantly, have a great day.